Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this launch webinar in respect of the proposed submission of the Greater Cambridge Local Plan document. My name is Stephen Kelly. I'm the Joint Director of Planning for Greater Cambridge, and I'm joined by a number of colleagues that will introduce themselves as they go through the various sections of this presentation. I need to start by just offering a little bit of an explanation about how today's session will go. The presentation element of the webinar is being recorded, and that's so that those people who can't make it this evening or this afternoon, or indeed if you're on the call, you can refresh your memory later. And that section will be published on the Council's website for people to view. Attendees will not be able to unmute and ask questions verbally, but we'll be able to ask questions in the chat function, and we'll obviously endeavour to answer those questions live if possible, if not in writing in due course. But please be aware that your name and question will be visible to those attending the webinar. Your name and the question you post in the chat will not be visible on the recording. So with that in mind, please be mindful and respectful in terms of your comments and questions in the chat. What we won't be doing is we'll stop the recording at the end of the presentation, and the question and answer session will be something that is not recorded. Firstly, because we don't want to make that part of the process too intimidating and people feeling that their questions might be answered and seen more widely. And certainly the intention is to try and get through as many questions as we can in that part of the process. So with that, I suppose it falls for me to talk through the first slide and the plan making process and hand over. Is it Terry, I think, who're going to pick the next phase up, or is it Jonathan?
Hello, Stephen. I'm going to take over this bit. So my name is John Dixon. I'm the Planning Policy Manager for the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service. And just going to give a very brief overview of what we're going to cover in our presentation slides today. So we're going to give a little bit of how we got here in our plan making journey so far, and what this stage in a broad sense is all about. Then we're going to focus on going through the content of the consultation, particularly some of the key elements of the plan that's out for consultation, the development strategy, some of the key sites, some of the policy themes that we've been running through our plan making process up to this point, and some of the key issues impacting on the delivery plan that we are aware of as we move forward for the next stages. Then we're going to try and give an overview of how to make representations, how to use the website and other ways which you can comment. So in terms of the plan making process, the plan making process has been a long journey. We actually started back in 2020 and have done 3 main stages of public consultation to get to this point. Back in 2020, we held our first conversation, which was quite an open general consultation about the sort of issues the plan should address. And we did lots of consultation events. We had a whole event in the Corn Exchange. We got an awful lot of comments on what the plan should be looking at. Then we did a first proposals consultation in 2021, which was starting to put together what the plan was proposing in terms of the number of homes and jobs to be planning for, the sites it was looking at, and the emerging policy approaches. We then had, I think, a bit of a delay in our process while we resolved some key issues, particularly around water supply, transport, the changes to plan making system. And we published some reports in the intervening period, but our next big consultation, some of you might remember, was earlier this year, where we consulted on a draft local plan and lots of supporting evidence. That finished at the end of January, and we got around 8,500 comments. And since that time, officers have reviewed all the comments, looked at all the issues raised, responded to them, gathered up further evidence, and been through processes with our councillors to sign off the documents before coming out for this consultation. So we're currently consulting on the proposed submission plan, which is the plan I would be putting forward to the Secretary of State seeking to adopt. And with running this consultation until the 25th of September. The next step would be, again, we'd gather all those comments together, we'd report them to our full council and the members before looking to submit that plan to meet the government's deadline, where they set a deadline for this kind of plan to be submitted by the end of the year. So what's the documents in our consultation? Well, there is an entire complete proposed submission local plan, which is, I guess, the main document we're consulting on, but it's also supported by a policies map showing the spatial expression of the policies within that document. We also provide a lot of evidence really of the background to that document and how we came up with the policies. So the sustainability appraisal, for example, looks at the impact of those policies and compares them with the alternatives that are available. We've done topic papers where we explore in detail the evidence behind each policy under each theme. We've got the statement of consultation, which goes through the comments we received, particularly at the last stage, and shows how they've been taken into account. We've also got statements of common ground and so on with our neighbours and statutory bodies that we have to work with to create plans. And there's a suite of other evidence in our document library, all of which is on our website. This stage of consultation is a bit different from earlier stages. So those other consultations I mentioned, it was all about gathering views, a more open consultation. What do you think about these issues? What do you think about the emerging draft? This stage is a more formal stage where we're required by the process to be asking effectively, is the plan sound? And is the plan legally compliant with government requirements for preparing plans? So soundness is defined by national policy. And as you can see on the screen there, it's all about being positively prepared, justified, effective, and consistent with national policy. So when you make comments on this plan, those are the questions in front of you. Is the plan sound? Yes or no? And if it's not, what would need to change to make it sound? And I'll pass on to colleagues to deal with the content. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm Max Laverack. I'm one of the team leaders in the team, and I'm going to take us through the next few slides, kicking off with a brief update on the development strategy. So the key headline about the development strategy is that particularly those who are familiar with the draft plan that we consulted on at the end of last year, there are very minimal changes that we've made from that plan that we consulted on in this proposed submission plan. The headline is, we're very much still planning to meet our needs through to the end of the plan period in 2045. So the most likely forecast that we have identified for the number of jobs that would be generated across the area in the plan period is 73,300. So since we undertook, I should say, produced the draft local plan, we commissioned further work, specifically a review of data, informing that need for jobs and homes that we identified previously, just to ensure that that data was still a robust and up-to-date basis on which to calculate our needs. That review concluded that that data had not changed significantly such that we needed to review that figure. And we did also, as part of that process, consider all of the representations that we received on the previous draft local plan, including comments that we received on the approach that we took, and also new and updated site submissions as well. The key thing to highlight is there has been a small change, a very, very small change in the minimum new number of homes that we need to meet our need. So that's because there's been a small change in the background data that is used to calculate what's called the standard method. So this is a standard methodology that government sets, which sets the sort of minimum starting point on which you need to plan for in terms of the number of homes. So that resulted in a very, very small change. I think over the plan period, it's around 99 homes different from the number that we consulted on in the previous draft plan. So really broadly the same. The key thing to highlight, though, is that figure is also coincidentally around the same number as that we would need to plan for to deliver all of the jobs that we're planning for. So so there's a nice balance therefore between the sort of the objectively assessed need that we get from government, but also the level of ambition and aspiration that we're setting in our plan in terms of the economic growth and jobs that we're planning for. The next aspect in terms of the strategy will also be very familiar. We are still pursuing a strategy that focuses growth in order of preference. Firstly, in Cambridge, in the urban area of Cambridge, which is deemed to be the most sustainable location for growth. Then at the edge of Cambridge, but noting that there are a number of constraints in relation to the green belts. The green belt constrains how many homes and jobs we can plan for in that area. We then looked at new settlement options, so particularly Camborne, given that is the most one of the more sustainable options for growth in the area because of the new east-west rail station that's expected to open during the plan period. There are a number of other new settlements as well that we're already planning for, and we identified an additional new settlement option at a site called Grange Farm. More on that in a moment. And then we looked at other options in the rural part of the area. Firstly, looking at the southern cluster, which is a location in the south of the district where many of the employment campuses are based, and then throughout the rest of the rural area, particularly at the most accessible villages. So this is a sort of visual representation of that strategy on the map. Key point to make is there is no significant change from the draft plan in 2025. The orange sites are the ones that were already adopted sites in the adopted local plans for Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire. The purple sites are those that are new proposed additions in this local plan. We are required to establish what's called an appropriate strategy for growth in the area. Government policy sets out that sort of as alluded to in the previous slide, we cannot release any greenbelt unless there are exceptional circumstances to do so, and that's quite a high bar. We deem that there is no land left without causing significant harm to the greenbelt. So so that's why you'll see we've obviously focused allocations at the Cambridge urban areas, particularly the site at Coldham's Lane. That's already in the adopted local plans. There are then some sites identified on the edge of Cambridge, but then much of the growth is focused on new settlements, so particularly at Camborne, at Grange Farm, and the existing new settlements, which are beyond the green belt. And provide a sustainable basis for planning for growth. But this is the sort of choice we've had to weigh up through the process. So you can either go for sites in the green belt, however, noting government sets a really high bar for releasing those, or you can look at alternative sites beyond the green belt. And generally, the sort of the balance we've reached is some growth at the edge of Cambridge, but also growth in other locations beyond the green belt that, for example, well served by sustainable transport. There's one exception to that. The sites at the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and Bagram Research Campus, where it's deemed there are site-specific reasons to justify changes to the greenbelt boundaries in those locations because of their particular importance to the economy of the area, and there's sort of something about facilitating the growth of those sites because of the sort of the economic benefits and the clustering opportunities, the unique opportunities those sites present to drive growth in the area. So overall, looking at the alternatives, including new settlements, these offer enough sustainability to outweigh kind of the benefits. So, so in terms of key changes to highlight on the strategy more generally, so you'll have seen that North East Cambridge, we've made a change to that policy from the draft plan. So previously we had hoped that site would provide an opportunity to provide new homes on the edge of Cambridge outside of the Greenbelt. And it was a proposed allocation in the draft local plan. Unfortunately, that site was reliant on funding that was due to be provided by government, and that funding was withdrawn last August. And the likelihood is that the wastewater treatment site, which is currently on that site, is going to remain on site and will need to be upgraded as well to provide sufficient wastewater capacity to meet the needs of this local plan. However, we still think there is a significant opportunity for growth at North East Cambridge, probably driven primarily by more employment-led growth at locations such as the Cambridge Science Park and the Cambridge Business Park. Therefore, we have now replaced the allocation with an area of major change policy. This will be flexible and will allow us that site to come forward for growth, responding to some of the constraints on the site. And I'll say a little bit more in a moment, but the key thing is that the strategy we've set is not reliant on North East Cambridge to meet our needs. We can meet our needs on other sites elsewhere. Greenbelt, I've said a little bit about this already. The key point here is that the housing needs can currently be met without any further releases of Greenbelt. However, there was a change in government policy a couple of years ago, which created this new concept of grey belt. So grey belt is basically Greenbelt that sort of is weaker performing against the nationally set purposes of Greenbelt. There's no specific requirement for us to review Grey-belt for the plan, because our view is we can meet our needs without needing to look at Grey-belt. However, government policy recommends that you do undertake a Greenbelt review to identify where that Grey-belt is. So we've now updated our Greenbelt study and published that alongside the local plan as part of the evidence base that identifies where the Grey-belt is. Most of that land is not, probably not surprising, not on the edge of Cambridge, where land that serves the sort of the strongest purposes in sort of preventing sprawl, etc., and predominantly are kind of small areas of land which are set sort of on the edges of villages. That doesn't change our position ultimately, because we can meet our needs in more sustainable sites and locations without having to release that green belt. I've already mentioned the point about the site-specific exceptional circumstances to support further growth at the biomedical campus. And I guess the other key thing just to highlight is the update to that Greenbelt study continues to confirm that the local Cambridge Greenbelt purposes remain relevant. So, for example, those focus on the role of the Greenbelt, amongst other things, in sort of protecting the historic character of the city. And there are a number of areas of Greenbelt that sort of strongly meet that role. Greybelt land being land that doesn't perform strongly against these purposes. And finally, just to say, we're not making any changes to the Gypsy and Traveller provision that we're planning for in the plan, continuing to focus on making the best use of existing sites and seeking provision through our strategic sites as well. A little bit more just on North East Cambridge. I've already said a little bit about this, so I'll keep this relatively brief. So the key headline here being the move away from that being an allocation towards an area of major change. Now, to say a bit more about this will provide a flexible framework so that will support development to come forward where there are opportunities. But what we've also done is add additional references in that policy and additional criteria in that policy to acknowledge that there are a degree of constraints on that site. So for example, things like the on-site wastewater treatment works, which inevitably constrains the types of development that can come forward there because of things like the odour impact of that site, but there are also other protected industrial areas in that site too. So the policy provides a framework to kind of balance some of the potential impacts of development against the opportunities. We still think there are ongoing opportunities in that area to provide more houses, for example, plan sensitively and in the right locations. But ultimately, our aim is to maximise the potential of that area as an innovation district that can continue to support the growth of the city. We did make a small change in that area by allocating the Milton Road garages sites as a standalone allocation. So that reflects the potential of that site to contribute to our development needs in that location. There is still a willingness to bring that site forward for residential development. Other Cambridge area changes just to sort of highlight here. So we've made some minor boundary changes to a few sites. So Old Pressmill Lane and the police station and also at Parkside as well. And there've been a number of capacity changes just to reflect recent proposals that we've received. So for example, at 2 to 28 David Road, 1 to 78 Hanover Court, and also the Old Press Mill Lane site was amended to reflect some recent planning permissions that have been built out. So I'm now going to hand over to Terry, who's going to take us through some of the other Cambridge changes and some other changes as well.
Thanks, Max. I'm going to rattle through these. So we previously in the draft plan stage had 2 allocations for the area around Clifton Road. So we had Cambridge Leisure and Cambridge Junction as one allocation, and then the Clifton Road Industrial Estate as a second allocation. We would really like to see comprehensive development come forward here rather than a kind of piecemeal approach, noting the fact that there is different sort of land ownership parcels here, but we want to see development to be really coordinated. We also need to recognise the fact that East West Rail have proposed a station entrance on this side of Cambridge Railway Station, which could be a real game changer in this area because currently Clifton Road Industrial Estate is a bit of a cul-de-sac. So we think there's a real opportunity here to change this area, see it redeveloped for a real mix of uses, really led by the cultural, community, sort of arts uses that happen at the junction at the moment and at Cambridge Leisure, but also complemented by other uses that are kind of compatible with this highly sustainable central location. So a range of jobs, employment opportunities, open space, retail, residential, and other things like hotels and a hotel and other things like that. So trying to bring it forward as one comprehensive development, but still making sure that it's really focused on those community facilities which are really cherished by people in the city and in the wider region. We also have the Eastern Gate Public Realm Improvement Area. So previously this kind of covered Newmarket Road and a bit of East Road, but based on the representations we got, we have decided to extend this policy area now to include the Elizabeth Way underpass. The reason for that is there was a strong community aspiration to see some of that space around the river area sort of redeveloped as a kind of civic area for community uses, and we thought there was a lot of kind of merit in those proposals. So we have decided to extend the public realm improvement area to cover those potential opportunities to come forward. In terms of some of the bigger sites on the edge of the city, so people will be familiar with Cambridge East, which is largely Cambridge Airport at the moment. That site has now recently been sold and is expected to come forward during the plan period as we had anticipated. You've also got Marley, which is the development which is ongoing at the moment to the north of Newmarket Road, and Springstead Village to the south of the existing airport. What we've sought to do here is bring it forward as one comprehensive development, noting obviously that it's coming forward in different phases, but really what we've sought to do is to clarify the leisure and cultural infrastructure uses on the site, particularly around some of the requirements for things like swimming pools and other uses, as well as some of the heritage assets both within and adjacent to this site, to make sure that as development comes forward over time, those assets are protected as well as their setting, which is in line with not only our policies but national policy as well. Similar to Clifton Road, actually, East West Rail have also said that they would be looking forward to bringing forward a railway station at Cambridge East, provided it was funded by third parties, and that is currently still on the card. So what we are seeking to do through the policy is to make sure that if a station was to come forward, that the development proposals would reflect the massive improvements in accessibility to the site. We've also sought to refine the wording around off-site green spaces to make sure we protect the sites of special scientific interest, and we also want to ensure direct access towards the Wickham Fen Vision area, which is beyond the city to the north. In terms of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, as Max has already said, we believe there are exceptional circumstances to release additional land from the Greenbelt, which is commonly kind of referred to as the Phase 4 land. We've sought to amend the uses slightly. So in terms of the overall number of commercial floor space, it's still broadly the same as what was in the draft plan, but what we've done this time is we've kind of split it out between the biomedical, biotech, life science floor space, and then what would be needed in terms of academic and educational floor space. So all we've done really is sort of split those different floor spaces out. We've also clarified what the kind of appropriate uses would be in the strategic enhancement area and the landscape improvement area, which are the kind of green areas to the south and east of the campus on the diagram there on the right-hand side, really making sure that, you know, those areas are for amenity for those living, working, visiting the campus. In terms of its kind of ecological benefits, there are lots of ecological sensitivities in and around this area, and we need to make sure that those are properly planned for and incorporated into these improvement areas, but also in terms of active travel connections as well, and just thinking about how this needs to make sure it's really plumbed into those walking and cycling routes in and around this part of the city and the wider rural area beyond it. Yeah, and we've also added further reference around kind of movement and connectivity, really emphasizing the transport mitigation measures that need to come forward to make sure this development can address not only the existing transport issues in and around this area, but also what will come on the back of further growth. Obviously, Cambridge South Station is now open, but obviously with a lot more growth, a lot more people coming to the campus, development will really need to be phased with transport mitigation measures to make sure that people can get in and out of the campus appropriately. In terms of Camborne North, we're still proposing it for around 13,000 new homes and around 6,000 new jobs. The vast majority of those will probably come beyond this plan period. It's only around 2,550 homes in this plan period. And what we've done is we've done a lot of evidence, picking up on a lot of the comments that we've received from the draft plan stage, to try and fill any gaps that we had in the evidence previously. So there's been a lot of work done on transport. We've been working very closely with Cambridgeshire County Council, the Combined Authority, as well as National Highways and the Combined Authority to really think about what needs to happen in terms of transport mitigation. So a lot of transport modelling has been done, and all of that evidence is available for people to see on our website. We've done a lot of work on the green and blue infrastructure, the landscape and the ecology, noting that there are several sensitivities in and around this area, ancient woodlands, triple SIs, and others. And what we've tried to do is think about how we can, you know, apply best practices from this region and elsewhere to make sure that those really important assets are protected and enhanced through development. We've also updated the spatial framework. So one of the things that has come out of the views analysis, for example, is that what was previously the northern part of the site, which kind of went quite close to Ellsworth Village, the landscape evidence has demonstrated that actually that part of the site is highly sensitive from a landscape perspective, which reflected a lot of the comments we received. So we've actually sought to further increase the distance between the development and Ellsworth. But the same evidence also suggested that the western part of the site towards the 1198 is less sensitive from a landscape perspective, and therefore the site is slightly shifted further west in order to address the findings of the evidence. We've also enhance the wording with the strategic enhancement area, which is the big green buffer around the site, just to make it really clear that this is proposed for landscape, recreation, agricultural and ecological uses. It's not proposed for housing or employment uses or anything like that, because that was a number of the kind of concerns that was being raised by local people previously. I'm just going to pass on to Lauren now, who's going to talk through Grange Farm.
Thank you. So Grange Farm, we've been looking at the issues identified through the consultation and been working on new evidence to focus on the key issues here around transport, ecology, landscape, heritage and water resources. So this has led us to reduce the number of homes on the development from 6,000 to 4,500. This is after further capacity testing and in the context of comments received in the consultation that this site should be the number of homes on the site should be reduced. And then we've also done some further capacity testing to make sure we're making efficient use of land, and that's also fed into a slight change in the boundary. So the red line boundary is slightly further away from the boundaries of Little Abington and the houses along the A1307. And then we've also maintained that the boundary along the middle there to make sure that we're giving enough distance between the Roman Road and the Triple SI along Worsted Roman Road at the top. And then we've got the identification of a scheduled monument and Bronze Age barrows you can see to the west of the site. And we've also put a buffer around these to make sure that development is not impeding on the scheduled monument. And then we've also had further discussions around water resources and making sure that we're really working through the options to make sure that the water demand can be met. And this has been worked through with the Environment Agency and Anglian Water, and there are proposals for a potential wastewater recycling plant if required, but there's also options for off-site management as well. Also, transport in this area is incredibly important, so we've been working a little bit more to understand what the key transport mitigations are, including the CSET extension across the A11 and making that delivery of CSET into the site as well to make sure that that public and active travel connections can be made. Then in terms of the rest of the rural area, we have the two logistics sites, the land to the south of Cambridge Services A14 and land north of A1307 Bar Hill, so this is Slate Farm. So these sites are obviously in a very rural area, so in terms of the wording of the policy, we refine this to make sure that it's reflecting densities that are suitable in these locations, and also understanding the impacts on transport and making sure that's really clearly set out in the policy wording. You'll see Slate Hall Farm there has a spatial framework as well, and this is to make sure that we're retaining a lot of that green infrastructure required around the site to mitigate against flood risk impacts, but also maintain the character of the site. So some other changes, we've got the Welcome Genome Campus, which has planning permission, and we've got a site allocation for the expansion land, which has planning permission. And then we've also got a new policy area, and this is designed to really promote that one campus approach and support a mix of uses to support the development of the campus for both residential and sort of cultural and community uses as well. And then with the former Spices site, in consultation with Historic England, we've amended the boundary here to make sure that we're really managing the impacts of the scheduled monument correctly. So just extended the boundary to include that. In terms of the Abraham Research Campus, we've made some capacity changes and a slight change to the boundary to reflect recent proposals in the recent planning applications. And then moving on to development management policies. So this really looks at the key 7 themes in the plan. So in terms of climate change, we've introduced a new policy around sustainable retrofit. And this means that we've now got a policy for development that is for refurbishment or retrofit. And then we've also got a carbon reduction and energy demand reduction policy for new development to make sure we're covered on all areas. We've also reflected lots more requirements for managing overheating, making sure that we're really up to date with the latest thinking on this. We've also got refined thresholds for the whole life cycle carbon assessments and circular economy assessments to make sure that we're looking at sustainability in the round and not just at operational carbon. In terms of water efficiency, we've looked at a target of 90 litres per day for residential development below 100 dwellings, and this has been lowered from the previous 90 to 100 litres per day. In terms of biodiversity and green spaces, when we previously consulted on this, we consulted on a range of standards, and we need to do some further work to rationalise these and understand where these overlaps. We have now done that work, and this has resulted in an urban greening factor policy and accessible green space standards proposed in BGEO. And then we've also slightly revised our approach to protected open space to more broadly align with our approach to biodiversity and green spaces. In terms of wellbeing and social inclusion, we've looked at how healthy places are communicated in the plan, making sure that we're reducing the number of betting shops and requiring the provision of leisure routes. In terms of inclusive employment, we've added target for local construction jobs. And in terms of pubs, we've amended the safeguarded list to make sure that we're really protecting all of those as well. In terms of great places, this is the chapter looking at design. So this is really looking at housing density, providing that additional guidance on optimising site potential and to make sure that the density is responding to the site circumstances. In terms of tall buildings, we've put more emphasis on design quality and how this can contribute to well-being. This also links to designing for neurodivergency to make sure that we're really understanding the impacts of development. And then we've looked at the heritage assets policies and made sure we've really clarified our approach to managing the impacts on listed and unlisted heritage assets. In terms of jobs, we've looked at affordable workspace, and we've produced a new study to make sure that we can refine the percentage of affordable workspace requirements on large employment sites. In terms of homes, we've revised our approach to HMOs. We've produced a new study to understand the impacts of HMOs and suggested ways of how we can manage this. In terms of co-living, we've made refinements around securing suitable housing quality. And for build to rent, we've just really reviewed those contributions towards mixed and inclusive neighbourhoods. In terms of infrastructure, we've looked at the parking policy and provided more guidance on how appropriate parking levels should be identified. We've also introduced mobility hubs and provided greater detail on where these are and how these can be delivered in line with the emerging CPCA strategy. We've also provided safeguarded for more transport routes, and then also been much more clear on when infrastructure to be delivered in terms of phasing of development to make sure that it's delivered on time with development.
Thanks, Lauren. So we've always been very open about the external influences, I should say, and dependencies that affect the local plan. So just a few notes on these. So the Cambridge Growth Company and the forthcoming Development Corporation. We know this is coming. We're engaging closely with the Growth Company on this. There's no formal policy position on this, but the plan is based on local evidence and has not been informed by that government position. So we continue to work with them in light of sort of those changes that are coming down the road. But ultimately, they are very supportive of the plan and wish to see the plan adopted and are working with us to ensure that happens. On water, water scarcity and wastewater treatment has been obviously a major challenge throughout the preparation of this plan. One of the sort of biggest challenges around this is that providing the infrastructure to support that is subject to statutory water and wastewater planning processes that are separate to the local plan making process. So we've been working really hard with all the relevant partners. So we've responded ourselves in the local plan by providing measures in order to sort of protect the area from harm and ensure that growth can be delivered in a sustainable way that aligns with the water provision that is coming forward. So, for example, we've added in this new iteration of the plan specific requirements in the policies around the timing of housing delivery to make sure that aligns. We've got strong water efficiency policies that go beyond national standards, and our site policies explicitly state that delivery will need to be demonstrated to be in place. There'll need to be provision in place to actually enable that delivery. We also agreed statements of common ground with the water supply and wastewater companies, so that's Anglian Water and Cambridge Water, to confirm that those sort of constraints are not a barrier to delivering the local plan, and they will do what they need to do through their own processes to secure the infrastructure that enables that growth. On transport, we recognise transport is another key issue in the Greater Cambridge area. The strategy that we have brought forward was selected based on existing and planned provision of sustainable transport links. We've added and sort of continue to further develop our evidence that the strategy is deliverable in relation to the specific transport interventions that are provided. So all the information on that is set out in our infrastructure delivery plan. So that's identified all of the site-specific measures that are needed to get those sites away in transport terms, what further things will be needed, and it also goes into some detail about how much we think those would cost to demonstrate that the plan is deliverable and viable. We recognise that one of the key challenges is that is getting public transport into the city, and congestion is a major issue. That's a focus of the combined authorities' Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy, and a draft interim version of that strategy was agreed by the CPCA board on the 15th of July. That identifies shorter and longer term schemes that can help to address this issue, as well as identifying all of the site-specific schemes as well. That provides sufficient evidence that the strategy and sites can be delivered. And we're continuing to work really closely with the combined authority, but other partners such as the County Council and the Greater Cambridge Partnership to refine and finish the strategy by November, in time for the submission of the local plan for examination. So I will now hand over to others who are going to say a little bit more about how you can find all the key information and get involved with the consultation.
Thank you, Max. So just quickly, so yes, we are consulting, as John said earlier, up until the 25th of September, 5 p.m. So there will be 14 exhibitions taking place across the Greater Cambridge area over the coming weeks. They will all be available to see on our website, but the next slide does set out the kind of key dates and times. If you wanted to take a quick photo, you're welcome to do so. But yes, all the dates and stuff are online. So everywhere from kind of Linton to Gamlingay to Water Beach, we will kind of be there in person. There'll be exhibition events. So it's very much a drop-in. You can come in, talk to a member of the team, find out a bit more, ask your questions. So yeah, so if you could help publicize these events, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, that would be absolutely fantastic. That is a QR code of our website, but yes, yeah, I think if you found the link to the webinar, hopefully you've already come across our website and or seen our posts on social media. I'm going to pass over to Jenny, who's now going to set out sort of step by step how you can actually respond to the consultation.
Yep, so this is the process to how to find our documents and how to make comments. So if you go to our shared planning website, which the link was just given, this will be where you land up. The boxes at the top allow you to navigate through the different sections within the page. Therefore on this page you'll find all the information about the consultation, the list of events, how to find and view documents, and how to make comments. So to add comments using the online consultation system, you would click on the words "Our consultation platform" in the green highlighted box. That will initially take you to a contents page for the digital version of the local plan. And then you can jump to the relevant section of the plan that you're interested in reading and then commenting on. But you can also jump to the interactive policies map, the sustainability appraisal, and the habitats regulations assessment that are also able to be commented on, or go to the document library to see other evidence-based and supporting documents. You can make comments on the policies map. You can make comments, on the policies in the local plan, and there are a variety of ways to get to the policies. Sorry, Terry, next slide. So to get to the policies, you can either go from the initial top level contents, you can go by theme. You can either click on the contents and it will bring you a drop down of every policy in the plan, so you can navigate that way, or you can go via the green boxes on the themes at the bottom. So whichever way, you'll end up at the policies within the plan, which is where you need to be to make a comment. Also, from a link on the shared planning website, you can get to the story map, which provides an overview of the changes made to the local plan from draft local plan to proposed submission local plan. In terms of making comments, our preferred method is via the online consultation system, but you can also make comments by email or letter. If you do submit comments by letter or email, you also need to make sure that you complete the paper email response form so that you provide all the necessary information to allow us to process your comments, and that is available to download to print or email on our website. So to make a comment using the online consultation system, you navigate to the policy in the plans by going, say, to homes and then finding the relevant policy within homes. So for example, build to rent. You'll then find a tell us what you think section under each policy with a comment button. So if you click on that comment button, you will then be asked to log in or register yourself on the online consultation system. Through this process, please make sure that you clearly identify yourself. For example, are you making comments as an individual? Are you making comments on behalf of an organisation? Or are you acting as an agent on behalf of an individual or organisation? So please make sure that you choose the right option for you in terms of the comments that you're making. You'll then be asked to provide answers to a series of questions, such as the ones on the screen, whether the plan or document is sound, whether it's legal, whether you want to appear at examination hearings, whether you want to be kept informed. You'll then be asked to provide your comments. If your comments go beyond 100 words, you'll be asked to provide a summary. And you'll be asked to outline your proposed modifications. And you may also, there's an option to attach any files. The online consultation system will store your submitted representations and you'll be emailed a copy of your submitted representations. And if you have any difficulty with submitting comments, then there's our email address and contact number on our website. I think I'm back to Terry now on
Thanks,
Healer.
Jenny. So just the very last part of the presentation. So one of the key things that people always want to know is what sites are being submitted to the councils from landowners, developers and agents, and how have the councils assessed those sites and what are the kind of, the assessment outcomes. So that falls within the Housing and Employment Land Availability Assessment, or the HELA. That is on our website. So if you go to the main landing page, which is this one here, which is the local plan, the 20-year plan for the Greater Cambridge area, it will take, if you scroll down, it will take you to this bit about site submissions. We've received a lot, nearly 1,000 sites in total, and way more sites than we actually need to meet our housing and employment needs. I would say that the easiest way to find sites is to go to our sites web map, which is this link here. That then opens up a separate page, which basically sets out a bit more about the HELA, what it does, and then also gives you this map. Now, this map is an interactive map, so as soon as you click on one of the sites, all of the site assessments that relate to that site will then appear below the map, and then you can see how it's scored in terms of impacts on landscape or impacts on ecology. What does it mean in terms of site access, highways impact, etc., which have been undertaken by all of our various assessment teams. So we have this information in a PDF. It's a very long series of PDFs, but the quickest way to find out about site assessments is using our interactive web map. Right, that concludes the presentation. Thank you for bearing with us.